As we turn our attention now to the grain markets, the soaring tensions in Ukraine is capturing many of the headlines. With some of the most fertile land on earth, Ukraine is a large exporter of corn, but it's the country's wheat that has the biggest impact on food security across the world. In 2020, Ukraine exported roughly 18 million metric tons of it, making it the world's fifth largest exporter. To discuss this topic and more in the grain complex, we were joined on Wednesday by Darin Newsom of Darin Newsom Analysis. Let's start off today's conversation discussing the situation with Ukraine. Ukraine is known as the breadbasket for Europe, one of the names they have there. Let's talk about how this could all play into the commodity situation. I mean, big picture, what's worst case scenario with those tensions, and how would that affect the commodities here in the U.S.?
Worst case scenario, obviously, from a global point of view, is Russia actually invading Ukraine again, similar to what it did this time of year in 2014. What it does then is it puts it puts the spotlight on crude oil, natural gas, wheat, and corn, and in the grains. Obviously, it's the wheat market and Chicago market in particular. So, I mean, again, we don't want to see, I think the rest of the world doesn't want to see Russia invading Ukraine again. And then the after effects of the threatened sanctions, are they followed through on? What are the effects of the market? It's going to add volatility to already incredibly volatile markets that, some of this due to the meltdown in global stock markets here in January. And it just makes a volatile situation that much worse.
You mentioned the word volatile, Darin. I think of the wheat complex we've seen as of late here. Want to mention, though, here this week we've seen Kansas get quite a bit of snow, at least in places. I'm thinking 20-plus inches it looked like on the map there. What's your take of how this affects that winter wheat crop? I've heard you talk about before, we hear a lot of things in the wintertime, but wait till the spring to see what that crop is. Is that still your assessment at this time of year?
The winter wheat crop is not made or lost in the winter months. And, it can be hurt or it can be helped, but it's not made or lost here. And so we have to kind of take a step back. Now, this winter storm that moved through this week brought some incredible snows. As you said, we're hearing two feet plus in some parts of far western Kansas. And then, maybe a couple hundred miles away, it was 2 inches. So, I mean, it was low, it was centralized, it was very regionalized, and it certainly could help the area. But the big picture is much of the southern plains in the western part remain in a drought situation. They continue to show soil moisture deficits. This could help a little, but it doesn't improve the big picture all that much as we work our way into the last half of winter and start to set our sights on spring.
Well, Darin, right, wrong, or otherwise, this time of year we start to see analysts come out with their expectations, what we'll see when it comes to the corn versus soybean acreage debate as we approach the spring planting season. What's your thoughts on that conversation? I mean, we're just nearing the end of January here.
In all seriousness, if we take it into account, fertilizer prices and the possibility of the nitrogen fertilizer just isn't going to be available this spring. The general consensus seems to be that we're going to see an increase in soybean acres in 2022. It makes sense. So this would also tell us that Punxsutawney Phil does not see his shadow. It sees his shadow. We're going to have a later spring. So I do think there's a good chance that we're going to see increased soybean acres. I know there's a lot of chatter out there that soybean acres is going to outpace corn this year. It's always possible, but the U.S. likes to plant corn, likes to find a reason to plant corn. So it'll be very interesting to watch play out here in 22.
Darin, something else I wanted to ask you about, I think you mentioned this here earlier. We see a bit of a sell-off when it comes to some of those stock markets. What could that mean for commodities?
Yeah, the interesting thing is we've got a lot of selling going on in the stock markets right now. I know toward middle part of the week, towards the latter end, we did see some buying, but overall there's this bearish sense to the stock markets here in throughout January. And what this could do is that money's going to look for somewhere to go. It's not just going to sit on the sidelines. It doesn't all just get converted to cash and they sit on it. And so when they start thinking about commodities, and given the talk that inflation is still here, inflation's still a hot button issue, what they're going to do is going to look over in the commodity complex, and they're going to look for markets that have bullish fundamentals. And there's a long list of those. And when I talk about bullish fundamentals, talking about future spreads. I'm talking about inverted forward curves. They've got their pick of, of almost anything from crude oil and heating oil to corn, soybeans, wheat. They can choose which markets they like the best. So I think it is going to bring some money into the commodity sector, and it's going to particularly bring money into those markets again that have long-term bullish supply and demand. Certainly, we can see that playing out with the types of rallies that we're seeing in these commodities. We can see what soybeans have done, certainly what wheat has done of late. And so, yeah, I think it's going to make for, bring up the word again, a very volatile spring with all of the other factors, all of the other issues that are still at play.
Darin, final word is yours this week. What final thoughts would you like to share with our viewers, or what piece of marketing advice would you like to leave us with?
The one piece of marketing advice is the one I've been asked a great deal, and that is if my dad was sitting across the desk from me and asking if it was time to lock in some of these new crop prices, I would not tell him no. I don't know how many negatives are in that sentence, but I would not tell him no. These are good prices, but I'd like to keep some powder dry. Given the long-term fundamental situation, corn, soybeans, wheat, I don't want to get everything sold. I want to sit back, let these markets run for a little while, give them some room, see if some of that investment money comes in, and then kind of bet on the idea that we're going to have better selling opportunities down the road.